And we continue our election coverage, Decision 2020, the SoCal impact, with a look now at Proposition 16. It is a ballot measure that we have discussed on this show previously. If you missed it, Prop 16 would restore affirmative action in California. And yet again, if that sounds simple and straightforward, it's not. Here to break it down for us is CalMatters reporter Mikhail ZINSHTEYN. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
We could spend the whole time talking about the history leading up to this. So let me just try to do the quick recap here. Affirmative action has been deemed illegal here in California for quite some time due to a previous ballot measure, Prop 209. Prop 16 would repeal Prop 209. Michael, remind us how this wound up on the ballot here in 2020.
Sure. So this was a ballot measure that was put forth by the state legislature in order for lawmakers to put a proposition for the voters to consider. It has to pass 2/3 majorities in both chambers. Democrats pulled that off this summer. It's believed that the protests related to the George Floyd killing helped put the measure over the hump, and now it's up for the voters to decide whether to bring back affirmative action. What this proposition is proposing is to reinstate a public agency, so that's a local government, that's a public university, to consider race, gender, ethnicity, or nationality as in admissions or in hiring or in contracting. So that's what we mean by affirmative action.
And let's talk about what it's not. We actually had an opportunity to speak about this with one of the architects of Prop 16, Assemblymember Shirley Weber of San Diego. Let's take a look at a part of our chat with her previously on Inside the Issues.
We decided that it was time for us to really address the issue because there were a lot of myths about it, and there still are a lot of myths about quotas, about whether or not certain groups lose out and others do not. And what we've seen over the 24 years is, one, that most of those myths are not correct. We don't see an increase in certain populations at the university, nor have we seen a decrease in those populations. They've not benefited at all from Prop 209.
So, Michael, break down for us, because it seems to me one of the most controversial aspects of Prop 16 is the research on this and looking at, okay, we put a ban on affirmative action. Where has that left us here in California? What are the two sides saying on this front?
So the two sides point to different data, and the data is nuanced. If you look at the composition of the UCs, then you've seen an increase for some groups, Latinx students. I think their share of the student body has gone up since the 90s. A lot of that has to do with that population increasing in high schools as well. But then if you look at Native American students and African American students, their share either has been flat or has gone down. And then if you look at admissions rates, then the actually admissions rates for all racial and ethnic groups have gone down, but for Black and Latinx and Native American students, they've gone down more since Prop 209.
But if you talk to those who very much oppose Prop 16, they say, hey, don't blame this all on Prop 209. Earlier here on Inside the Issues, again, we had the opportunity to speak with a gentleman named Ward Connerly, who was one of the main proponents of Prop 209. Here's what he had to say.
There may not be as many people who are brown skinned like me who are being admitted to UC Berkeley or UC San Diego or UCLA, but we're not being denied because of skin color. We're being denied because there are others who are competitively more admissible than we happen to be.
So, Michael, at the heart of this can get really complicated, but as you've discussed, this really breaks down to two E words, right? Equality and equity. Can you kind of define those two for us and explain how they relate to this ballot measure?
I'll try to define it, but I don't think any attempt at
Sorry.
defining those two will do either justice. Equality is, and the yes side, yes for Prop 16 uses both words, equality and equity. The no side doesn't really use the word equity. And as the no side sees it, you want equality because with equality, everyone is judged by the same rules, and you can allow for certain provisions, such as one's economic background in decision making, particularly for university admissions. But considering race is just a non-starter. That's not equality. They say that's racism by another name. The yes side says something else. They say when they use the word equity, they're referring to the concept of making up for past inequities, making up for past inequality. This nation has a tortured history with racial subjugation, with well past the Civil War. We've had multiple policies that have disenfranchised African Americans and other groups, and the list goes on. And so for the yes side, you need something to make up for those generations of inequalities.
And I just wanted to jump in and say, and given how much of a spotlight there has been on racial reckoning in 2020, you might think that the yes on Prop 16 folks would be doing very well, but you've just written recently that so far, based on polling, it looks like this may not pass. What do we know about what's going on here?
I think we know that voters may be confused, and the typical coalition that would support this is so far not backing it at the numbers that you would need for the measure to pass. So California is it's not a one-party state, but the Democratic Party and the many independents who vote for Democratic lawmakers and for Democratic issues, they're dominant in the state, and roughly half of registered Democrats said they would support Prop 16. That's despite endorsements from a wide network of prominent Democrats: Gavin Newsom, the governor, Senator Kamala Harris, who's the VP nominee for the Democratic Party, and then dozens, if not scores, of state lawmakers and congressmen and women. Also, you have endorsements from major newspapers, the LA Times, the San Francisco Chronicle, numerous others. And that's not translating into stated support.
Yeah. And it's very interesting. I've read some reports that people who might in principle be supportive are wary of this because they feel like it's the government getting involved in their business. It's a really fascinating ballot measure. Michael, we appreciate your taking the time out to speak with us about it. Thank you so much.
For sure. Thank you.